My name is Lauren Hollows, and I am here with Marc Ratcliffe from MRWED. If you haven't checked out parts 1 and 2, we've covered all things TAE and the new standards, so make sure that you watch both of those videos. In this one, I'm interested, Marc, to find out how you guys are adapting. I think we were talking before, and you said you'd seen some assessment materials, and it was, very clear who it had been written by. It was not by a human. It was definitely GPT related. So how do you see, GPT changing things on the ground, like for good, for worse, from the training perspective, from the assessment perspective, how are you seeing the landscape at the moment?
Yeah, I see it on two sides, Lauren. I think there's the generative AI that we're using for ourselves, okay, for trainers, and then what our students use, okay. So I'll take it from both angles. So for us, I think there's a lot of really positive benefit in using something like a Chat GPT, although there's some wonderful other products that are out there. Things like Write Sonic is one of my favorites at the moment as well. And what I like about that one, just as a quick aside there, is it also has the imaging built in, as well as the audio Sonic stuff that they can do as well there, which is awesome, including some credible Australian sounding AI voices. So that's always hard to get, I think, when you're doing voiceovers and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But what I think is the important thing there is that it's a tool, like any other tool, just like Google is a tool.
Yeah.
And Google doesn't give us everything that's correct straight up. We still need to edit that. We still need to understand what's credible sources. We need to also recognize IP and copyright issues in terms of what we're searching for. But it fast tracks our time. As being someone who's a former school teacher, where I used to send kids to the library to go and do their research, going to Google now is so much faster, So yes, it fast tracks things. There's that automation side of things as well that you were talking about in our last interview. I think that's really helpful. And certainly in the last 12 months, developing new TAE resources, that Chat GPT and the kind were very useful in getting a first draft of things. Or in some cases, I'd say, I want a list of 8 things. I can think of 5. What's another 3? So then just getting additional things. So I feel like I'm saying there's the automation, which is speeding things up and taking out some of that mundane part of the research. But then there's the augmentation that goes with that. So I'm already bringing subject matter knowledge to the table. I've got a particular turn of phrase, a way that I like to frame sentences. So I don't necessarily like the way that the generative AI comes up with that. But what it can do is give me some extra, beef to add to my existing content, if that makes some sense. So I think from a trainer's perspective, they're the sorts of things that we can be doing. Similarly, there's some really great products on the market there that can help you create, very fast and very high definition images when it comes to your presentations. But you still need human intervention to make sure that those images are appropriate, and of course the IP copyright situations that go along with that one. So that's from the trainer's perspective. I think there's lots of great products that help us to do our stuff faster. When it comes to our students, I do think we have to show them how in terms of modeling, how to use the AI most appropriately and safely and so forth. So from that perspective, I wouldn't be trying to restrict its use, because people are going to find a way to use it anyway. But it's how do we harness it? How do we teach them to harness that appropriately? And I gave a presentation on this last week to a group of school teachers, and my suggestion was you could embed the first draft and say, we want you to go to ChatGPT or something similar. That's the task. Let's do that. And then the second draft is the edit. What are you doing to that? That shows me that you understand what's happening. So I think they're the sorts of changes we can start to see, so that we can show how to responsibly use that AI, because it's going to happen. And I remember way back when, even the calculator, we'd be saying, no, you need to do it all in your head. When are you ever going to have a device in your back pocket that's going to allow you to do quick calculations? Well, of course, we all have a device in our pocket. But it's what you put into it. Like if you put the wrong data into it, you're going to get the wrong results. The same thing is true when you do a search on Google. The same thing is true when you use generative AI. If you're not using those prompts in the right way, in terms of the input, your output is not going to be of high quality. That's what we can be helping our staff with. course, that we can be helping our students with making good choices with just another one of the smorgasbord of tools we have at our fingertips.
Yeah, I think it's exactly right. It's I guess it's taken us from how do we go about building and accessing knowledge to how do we go about synthesizing and filtering knowledge. And I think that that's the big one for me is like helping like students to kind of go, okay, but where is this information coming from? You know, how do we know that it's valid? You know, what are some of the checks that we need to be doing in order to kind of go, well, does that make sense? You know, because there are times when, you know, whether you're using GPT or whether you're using Gemini or whether you're using Claude, you know, it's very authoritative in the information that it's providing. And I'm like, you're wrong. And it's like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, yes, you are.
I think the best thing to do to show them this as an example is to take something that's like in the public domain that you already know is true. Like, so you might take something from your website. So for instance, I showed an example of this in the presentation that I drew the generative AI to our website. Here's a profile. Okay, the profile I currently have for myself, it's a few years old. I want you to write a new profile for me, right? And it came up with a very glowing profile, but also made stuff up. I mean, it sounded great, but it wasn't real, it wasn't true. And even though I've got a reasonably unique name, spelt in a different way and all the rest, there are other Marc Ratcliffe spelt the same way around the world. So there's a radio DJ in the UK, there's a doctor in South Africa, and there's a whole bunch of folks in the US as well. So it was just taking some of those things, which, you know, seemed about right from what it's been learning about, but it just wasn't the right Marc Ratcliffe in the same spot. And that would be true for many people. Imagine if you had a name like John Smith, how wrong that feedback could end up, you know, pushing out situations there. So it looks right, and even stuff like when I was doing some of the things for the TAE, you know, I would be talking about some of the standards for RTOs, and it would grab some of the real standards perfectly, and then other stuff that was just not accurate anymore. As we know, in our industry, things change fairly rapidly, so that we're still talking about SSOs and so forth, and ISCs and things that like were well dated, and we go, well, you know, it looks right, but it's not right, and we still need to have the knowledge to go through and edit that, and that's the important thing there. And for me, that's the important lesson for our learners, that if they don't know the answers, right, they can't filter that accurate information from others. So that's why we need to do the fault finding. So hey, by all means, do the search. Now let's compare that to our courseware and say, well, what are you finding that's wrong? And in fact, that might be a fun activity to say, well, here's something that's been spat out of ChatGPT. I want you to identify what's credible and what's not credible from this. And you know, I think that could be a fun learning tool.
We've done that in a couple of different ones. So we've done that with the health space. We've kind of gone, okay, you know, here's the systems. You know, here's this. You know, pick out what's incorrect within this. We've also done things like, okay, well, here's a policy written by ChatGPT for WHS. You need to go in. You need to check that it actually, you know, meets the WHS standards and it means this, that, and the other. I was doing it last night with fatigue management for heavy vehicle. And, you know, I said, well, like, here's the base policy. You'll need to go in, you'll need to, you know, you'll need to adapt it and then, you know, kind of upload it. And I was like, all right, cool. And so like, but when it spat out a couple of things, I was like, that's not right. I was like, no, that's okay. I'll leave it in there. I was like, that's good. I'm actually, because then that's something that the learners are going to have to look at and go, oh, no, that's not the right ratio. You know, like that was the old ratio. It's not the new ratio kind of a thing. So I think all that sort of stuff is good. And to me, it's very much driven by what would be suitable in the workplace. Like I would never turn around to my staff member and go, I need you to write a policy from scratch, not using anything else. Like even before ChatGPT, it was always like, go and find a template. Go and, you know, see what you can get, put something together and then like make sure it meets our needs. To me, I was like, it just seems completely irrelevant as to why you would ask a student to build something from scratch when there's no way that would happen in the workplace.
You would never do that in a workplace situation, correct?
Yeah. And I think that's where we have to lead a lot of things from. It's like, if it's going to be acceptable in the workplace to do it this way, then it should be acceptable within the assessment to do it that same way,
Correct.
you know?
I think the bigger issue, though, Lauren, and you'll have this on a couple of levels based on the other work that you do, is it's moving so rapidly that our training packages, our units of competency aren't catching up. So there was an interesting presentation that I saw the week before last, and it was from the Future Skills Organisation, and they were looking at some of the BSB units that were only updated a few years ago, where in some cases 80% of that unit will be impacted by generative AI. So it's like, well, they're not written that way now, so we have to teach them a particular way. But in fact, the way that they're going to be used, the way that they're going to be applied, is going to be quite drastically different. So that even has impact for the developers to say, well, how do we update these things, or how do we make them loose enough but also specific enough, so that progressing technology can be applied when it arrives. And it's certainly very much in the frame now. But even as I was going to look at some of our own TAE units, there's some things you go, you know what, that is almost old school thinking. That is not how it's going to be done. But we need to capture proof they can do it this other way, even though we're going to suggest they do it this new way, because that's going to be better for them and expected from their staff. And for me, that's where I always have a trouble with that industry engagement, because yes, we have to do it, and I 100% believe that we should. It makes good business sense, and of course, it helps us to comply. But we can't always change. We can never change what it says in the unit. We can augment and we can have these additional things, but in the end, we can't assess those additional things.
Yeah.
So we can't prove that we're getting that consistent standard that industry are asking for. So we can add content, we can add examples and so forth, but when it's a stated, or if it's a named performance criteria or performance evidence, we just have to teach that, and we have to capture evidence of that. So it's those types of things that I think are it become a bit of a problem for us. We do all the right things, but in the end, you're kind of guided by the source documents.
But I think that's why it is important, and what I would hope to see moving forward is that RTOs are more involved in the process of writing units of competency. I feel like, I think TAE has probably been one of the exceptions for this, understandably so, but a lot of training packages have been updated without actually taking into account feedback from the RTOs. And the problem with that is that RTOs understand some of the logistical changes. One of the worst packages for this is the PUA package, which is like, it's firefighting and things like that. And the way that they've written the units effectively requires you to go and observe firefighters in live scenarios. And it's like, the way that the unit has been written, just like, I understand that, yes, a person needs, like, if you're training a firefighter, they need to actually go out and fight live fires. But that is not the place where assessment can.
That's right.
Like every assessment, there's a whole load of factors there. Like, if someone is fighting a fire, I really want them to be focused on actually putting out the fire, as opposed to like, am I meeting the assessment criteria? And it's not like we can turn around and just start, burning houses down in order to meet unit requirements. So I think that there does definitely, and look, hopefully, what are we on now? Are we on SSOs, SOs? What's the name of the skills? It's just skills organizations.
Jobs and skills councils.
Oh, it's jobs and skills organizations. Oh God, JSOs. Is that what we're up to?
That's right. Just these. Come on, Lauren. You know this stuff.
I can't. It's too many acronyms to keep up with.
At the time of this publication, it's probably something different.
Yeah, well, this will be coming out in like 3 weeks, so it will have changed by then. But yeah, I think that there just needs to be more engagement from that perspective. And things like, the cybersecurity package, cybersecurity methods change every 5 seconds. So it's going to be learning to write units that are where we can really, just consider things in a lot more. And I'd go back to that kind of Singapore model that we talked about in the first one, where the whole purpose of the new Streamline units, when they came out, I feel like it was 6 or 7 years ago now.
I think it's more, but it's all good.
It's always showing my age. was that they were supposed to be streamlined. They were supposed to be smaller, and yet we continue to put more in there.
Yeah.
And I understand it from some perspective, but at the same time, I look at things and go, you know what? If the purpose of the unit is to do X, then we really need to focus on X. You can't go, well, but in order to do, like if we're talking about cooking, in order to do cooking, you've got to know hygiene. And in order to do cooking, you've got to know, yes, in order to be a chef, you need to know all those things. But in order to cook a chicken, okay, we really need to focus on how to cook a chicken, right?
Yeah, and I think you talked about the TAE as being an exception to the rule. I think that the challenge that was done with the TAE is there's still plenty of duplication that's unnecessary.
Yes.
So if it was more talking about, and I think what you're intimating there is about tasks and functions, like,
Yes.
and we say, well, this is where all the hygiene tasks and functions could be learned, and then we
Yeah.
apply that in these other ones, as opposed to, well, that's across all of them. We see a similar thing in the TAE where there's 6 units that looks at dimensions of competency. There's just massive duplication there, and you kind of asking these questions over and over again and say, okay, well, in the context of assessment, how do you apply the dimensions of competency? In the context of vocational facilitation, how do you do, like, it's just you discover it once. And
Yeah.
then later you kind of make sure that you are applying that, but it's not drilled down in each of them. And I actually had a chat with one of the people involved with that, and they said, you know what, we were looking at them unit by unit as opposed to how they might be put together down the track. And so that makes a lot of sense, that you want to try to make sure it's got everything that a self-contained unit needs, but in the context of a skill set or a qualification.
You're actually taking a lot away. The problem is that by doing that, they actually take time away, because the learners, unless you're working with really savvy providers who, like with certain qualifications, when we can build them beautifully, we can kind of go, well, we know that this is how we're going to do things. So we're going to take care of these sort of things, like one of the qualifications we've been building recently, right? Hygiene, basic occupational health and safety, duty of care, this, and this, that we know is in every single unit. We're taking care of those up front, and then we're gonna map back to the units, right? They can go and do this core skill set, and once they've done the core skill set, they don't need to do it again, kind of a thing. But there's just a lot of people that don't do that.
The problem with that, though, Lauren, is that only works when it's a single cohort. So if you've got the same people doing the same product, it's all good. If you're bringing people in, some people are doing skill sets, some doing full qualifications, some people doing individual units.
That's right. It's not always logistically possible.
You can't do that.
Yeah. So it is very challenging, but I would hope, I would hope to see that we're going to slowly peel. We need to start peeling back units, because otherwise we're not going to be able to be as adaptive and responsive in certain areas, the way that we're going. All right. Otherwise, just tell me, what are the most exciting things that MRWED has got coming up this year? And if a TAE trainer does have a 16, knowing that they don't have to, but that they would like to update their skill set so that, that they are keeping current. Every trainer is required to do PD every year, and there is, nothing better than updating your qualifications. Where can they find you? What have you got happening?
Yeah, it's a great way of framing that one. I mean, mostly I would suggest that folks, if they don't need to do it, then hold back. And the only decision I'd get you thinking, if you've got to say that the 10 plus, as it's affectionately called in our industry, the only worry that would have longer term is that once the 16 has its teach out phase, which is later this year, then you won't be able to update that to 16. You don't have to update it to 16 if you've got that, but if there's a future change, that might be something to think about. Then you have to take it all the way to 22, which may present itself with different challenges. But I like the way that you framed the PDs. You might just take a unit here or there, and there's so many choices under the 22. So you might say, well, I never did anything about that online assessment or online facilitation. I might take a unit here or a unit there as PD, and that starts to get you closer and closer to the point. If you really want to upgrade, we do have we do have an upgrade pathway for those that hold those previous qualifications. You can find those details on our website at www.mrwed.edu.au, and there's a tab there to either hit the certificate for in training and assessment. Drop down box will get you to upgrades. But like I said, I'd be making a strategic decision there, saying when's the right timing for this. My recommendation usually is if you don't need, then maybe hold off. But PD over time at your own pace on your own terms, I think is a very clever concept. Speaking of PD, though, a quick advertisement. I'm not sure when this one is airing, but I'm actually delivering. I'm actually in my Brisbane Centre right now, and I'm delivering a train-the-trainer boot camp. It's a 2-day program. It's not accredited, but it's 102 alternatives to lecture that really help to build our trainer and assessors kit bag over the 2 days. It's one of our most popular PD programs we've ever run. We've been doing it since 2011. It's our most updated version, so it's the brand new version. So it's the first time we're delivering the updated version of it, which is great. And I'm doing that on the 18th and 19th of April here in Brisbane. So that's the Thursday, Friday that week. Again, you can get those details on our website. And it's a fabulous program. Love running it. And if you're just looking to freshen up your training, it is for classroom-based training too, by the way, Lauren. Looking to freshen that up. Love to see you here and join in that one. It should be a fun couple of days.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, guys, you'll be able to find all of those links below. We hope that you guys have enjoyed this series. I always enjoy talking to Mark. Are you going to be at any of the conferences this year?
Lots of them, in fact. So, I mean, ITECA in June. So that's the one on the Gold Coast. Should be a great event. If you're on that private provider perspective there, it should be great. And I'll be talking a little bit about international education in the pre-conference symposium, I think it's called. So, if you're interested in learning more about that, we did chat about that during some of our stuff today. So we'll talk more about that. And we're an exhibitor there at that event. And then, as always, in Brisbane, we'll be back for the VELG National Vet Conference. It is the premier vet event on the calendar. So, look forward to seeing you there.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time, guys. Please, if you haven't already, do like, subscribe, comment, all of those good things. If you disagree with anything you've said, feel free to duke it out, but do so respectfully. My name is Lauren Hollows for NOI Education Services, and I have been here today with Marc Ratcliffe from MRWED.
Thanks so much. See you next time.